So with the release of The Killer, David Fincher now has a total of 12 movies in his filmography. So of course, it's a perfect time for me to rank all 12 of those movies from the worst to the best. And this should go without saying, but I'm going to continue to say it every single time I do a ranking video. This is not fact. This is just my opinion. Film is subjective. This is my personal ranking, how I personally feel about these movies. And your list is probably not going to be the same as mine, and that's okay. Drop yours below. We'll have a conversation about it. David Fincher is one of my favorite directors of all time, probably my second favorite after Christopher Nolan, which I dropped my Nolan ranking a few months ago after the release of Oppenheimer. Check that out if you haven't yet. So with that said, I really like to love almost all of these movies. There's only a couple that I don't, which I will get to. Some I definitely like more than others. There's a clear tier system for Fincher's filmography for me. I am also going to get into spoilers for every single one of these movies. I don't really know how I can talk about these particular movies without spoiling them. So if you haven't seen all of his movies, either jump off this video, watch them, and come back, or you can only watch the ones that you have seen. I'm going to put timestamps, and then you can come back and watch the other ones after you've seen those particular movies. So, another thing is, upon rewatching all of these movies except for one, which I will get to, in preparation for the release of The Killer and for recording this video, my ranking changed quite a bit. I mean, there are a couple movies that swapped. There was one that moved up several spots after rewatch, and I made a last-second change to my ranking before recording this video. So, if you think you know my ranking, you don't. And I locked my Letterboxd ranking, you assholes, so you can't look at that. You know who you are. I'm going to unlock it after I post this video, but I want to keep people in the dark as to what changes specifically I made. So there were quite a few things that were shuffled around pre-recording, and then like literally right before, there was one big last-minute change that I made. I'm like, yeah, I kind of want to move this section around a little bit. So with all that being said, I got to stay true to myself and how I feel about these movies after really, really thinking about them. And number 12 is going to be The Killer. Guys, I got to stay true to myself. This is Fincher's worst movie. This movie fucking sucks. Come on. I'm kidding. It's Alien 3. I mean, seriously, I despise Alien 3 with every fiber of my being. Kill it with fire. I mean, a vast majority of this movie is just very dull and boring and forgettable. This is the one that I did not rewatch in preparation for this video because I don't feel like I need to. I feel like I already have my thoughts on this movie. I don't think anything would change upon rewatch. So being boring and dull is far from the biggest sin this movie commits. It would probably still be last or second to last on this list. There's a little bit of the Fincherisms in there, but they get totally buried by the studio machine and the fact that he wasn't even involved of the final editing of this movie. He got kicked out of the editing process. There's a big story about that. Look into it if you want to. But the reason I hate this movie so much, the reason it is not the worst movie I've ever seen, but probably the one that pisses me off the most, is the decision they make in the first 10 minutes of the movie, and that is to kill off Hicks and Newt.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
Who were great characters from Aliens, and it completely undoes the victory of Aliens. These three characters survive after everything they go through. Great victory, completely undone in the opening of Alien 3 when they kill off two of those three characters. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was hoping it was a dream sequence. I'm like, Ripley's going to wake up. They're all going to be okay, right? Because this is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever seen. This is one of the worst decisions ever made in cinema history. Probably the worst decision ever made in cinema history, in my opinion. And nope, it was all real. They really did kill off these great characters off screen in the dumbest way possible, unceremoniously, for no reason, and did nothing interesting with it whatsoever. That made me so fucking mad, and that carried with me throughout the rest of the movie. Maybe if the rest of the movie was good, it could have saved it, but it wasn't, so it didn't. I absolutely despise this movie. By far and away, my least favorite David Fincher movie. Coming in at number 11 is going to be Mank. This is one that I actually watched for the first time in preparation for this video. I was dreading it because I was like 99% sure this was not going to be for me. And I was right. Look, this movie is extremely well made from a technical standpoint. The directing is great. The cinematography is great. Gary Oldman is phenomenal as always. Amanda Seyfried is also great. There are things to appreciate about this movie. That being said, it bored the absolute shit out of me. There was not a single point in time where I gave any kind of a fuck what was going on in this movie. It was a long 2 hours and 15 minutes. I actually did a stream with my buddies on the Rob Fishbeck Network, and I was so sure this movie was 3 hours long, but they told me in real time, like, no, it's actually just over 2. I'm like, really? It feels like it's 3 hours long. This movie is an absolute slog, and I will never watch it again, even if I do another Fincher ranking, because that's another one where my thoughts will not change. That is very much in the not for me category. Appreciate the filmmaking, but there wasn't a single moment where I was invested in anything. I found it excruciatingly boring. Mank comes in at number 11. Number 10 is going to be The Game. This one is incredibly frustrating for me because I think that the first 90% of this movie is really good, with some plot holes in there that you only realize after you get the final reveal. But up until that point, I thought it was very compelling. I thought it was very intriguing. I thought it was very thrilling. I was very invested in seeing where this was going to go. Michael Douglas gives a great performance. Sean Penn is great as his brother. Douglas has a really good arc in the movie. Unfortunately, once you get to the final reveal that this was all actually just a game, this just strains way too much credibility for me. It begs way too much suspension of disbelief. I just don't buy it. You go through with a fine-tooth comb all of the events that transpired prior to this reveal, and you're like, there is no way in hell they could have pulled this off. Way too many conveniences. I mean, there's the fact that he could have died in the car in the water. I know they said they had a diver, but yeah, I don't know. I still feel like he could have died there. He could have killed himself at a different point in time. He could have killed someone else. He could have put real bullets in that gun. He could have jumped off a different part of the building. There are so many different ways this could have gone wrong. It was just all too, way too convenient. Whoops. Way too convenient for me. And the fact that like the whole town was in on it, it was deserted, and they were like firing machine guns. This stuff just does not add up.
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
Doesn't completely ruin the movie for me because the ride is really good and I would still recommend it. But just go in if you haven't seen it. Oh, well, I just spoiled everything, so hopefully you have. But the destination is an extreme letdown and almost ruins the entire movie for me because just completely throws away all logic. And then the fact that Michael Douglas is so chummy with everyone afterwards, like, oh, you almost killed me, and now we're laughing about splitting the bill and stuff. Like, nope, does not work for me. Just absolutely killed all of the logic, and I don't buy. I just don't buy it. I don't buy that this was all game and they were able to pull this off. Too many conveniences, too many logic issues. So, great ride, thrilling, great performances, but totally lost me in the end. Number 9 is where I actually have the killer. Now, this one is a step up from Mank, a significant step up from Mank, but it was still relatively disappointing to me as a massive Fincher fan. There are things to like about this. I think that you get some of the Fincherisms back in there that were severely lacking in Mank. Mank didn't really feel like a Fincher movie. This one did. You have like the vibe and the look of a Fincher movie there. I think that it starts off really compelling. I think there is a really cool action scene in the movie. Michael Fassbender is great in the role. Unfortunately, this is just pretty generic and forgettable for the most part. I mean, it's a pretty typical revenge story, but without the excitement of like a John Wick or Kill Bill or Equalizer or something like that. Just, it got less and less interesting as it went along. I found myself losing interest. The movie kept me at an arm's length. While Fassbender's performance was great, the character was just a total robot, and I was unable to get invested in him. So, played out almost exactly how I expected. Very straightforward and generic plotline, elevated by some of the Fincherisms and Fassbender's performance, but this is one that just doesn't really stand out amongst Fincher's filmography. Number 8 is going to be The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. I think this is a very well-made film. I think it is a interesting idea. I think that Brad Pitt gives a great performance. I think the effects they use on him are really good. There's some good emotional beats in here, but I didn't really like the pacing of this movie. The first 45 minutes or so, I'd say the first act of the movie, very slow and, dare I even say, boring. It picks up a little bit and gets more interesting in other parts of the movie, but it's not one that I'd really want to rewatch. It's very long. I think it's like 2 hours and 40 minutes long. So it's not really up my alley compared to some of Fincher's other movies. It's not the type of thing that I would tend to gravitate towards and rewatch very often. And the pacing is a bit wonky. So lots of aspects to appreciate about it. I think it's a cool idea. And to see this life from the perspective of someone who's aging backwards, but not something that I'd ever really care to rewatch because not really my kind of thing, and it's pretty slow and takes a long time to get going. Number 7 is going to be Panic Room. This is another Fincher movie that is very straightforward. You've seen this type of home invasion thriller before, but I slightly prefer To the Killer because I just found it more exciting and more thrilling and more engaging. Fincher, the Fincherisms, elevate this movie from being a generic, typical home invasion movie. I think the characters are solid, the performances are solid. Forrest Whitaker is my personal favorite character in the movie, is a complex guy who is only doing this for the money because he needs the money really bad, but he doesn't want to hurt anyone, and he's trying to stop Dwight Yoakam from doing what he's doing. Dwight Yoakam is great in the movie. He's funny at first, like, who the fuck is Raul? I'm like, who are you? I'm Raul. Just, I don't know. I find that stuff so funny. This is probably my favorite Jared Leto performance. He's like getting lit on fire and stuff. Absolutely love that. Just a total dumbass. And his death was shocking. Several thrilling moments in the movie, like when Jodie Foster is trying to get her phone from the room, then get back in the panic room before they get in there. The dynamics are constantly changing. It's just a very interesting conflict. The fact that they're trying to get into this panic room to get the money, which is where Jodie Foster and Kristen Stewart are hiding. Then you have the stuff with the diabetes. There are some like home invasion thriller cliches in there for sure, and it doesn't stand out that much amongst Fincher's filmography, but I like this movie and enjoy it every time I watch it. I love the ending where Forrest Whitaker could have gotten away with it, but comes back to save them from Dwight Yoakam, who's like a total psychopath in this movie. So again, not super complex, not super unique when you compare it to Fincher's other movies, but very effective for what it is. Number 6 is going to be The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. This is one of 2 movies in Fincher's filmography that I hadn't watched in a very long time. I think I watched it somewhere around when it first came out. I didn't see it in theaters. In fact, I haven't seen any of these movies in theaters, unfortunately. But I think I watched it like when it first came to streaming or VOD or whatever. This is a movie that I like a lot of things about. Daniel Craig and Rooney Mara are fantastic and carry the movie. Rooney Mara kind of steals the show for me, honestly. And the scene where, I'm not going to get specific, even though I said I am going to spoil stuff, but it's a bit graphic with like SA stuff, so I'm not going to get too specific. But the scene where she gets back at the guy for what he did to her, incredibly satisfying. The stuff he did to her was super disturbing. I'm sitting there like, she better get him back. And boy, does she. Super satisfying scene and what she writes on him. Oh, man, so damn good. Then the storylines converge, and I love Craig and Mara's relationship, one of the best parts of the movie. You get little humor, bits of humor sprinkled in there, which is kind of a theme with all of Fincher's movies, even the ones that aren't really that funny. Like, most of his movies are pretty serious, but he will throw in some humor once in a while, and it always lands for me. Like in this movie in particular, when Craig is like, it's encoded, and Rooney Mara's like, please. And then later when she's like, may I kill him? Just such great stuff. The Skarsgård reveal and then seeing his kill room is so creepy and memorable. The cast all around is phenomenal. It's a very interesting story. They do go on a lot of different rabbit holes here, which is not necessarily bad in and of itself. But because of that, once you get to the ending of the movie, they have like 6 different endings. The movie just keeps on going and going. I can think of a couple different spots where it could have ended, and it would have been totally fine. But because they set up all these plot threads, they had to wrap them up and also kind of tease stuff for the next movie, which we never even got. So there are a lot of elements about that ending that did not work for me. It just kept going, made the movie 10 or 15 minutes longer than it had to be. So because of that, that holds it back a decent amount, and that is why it is outside of the top 5. Speaking of the top 5, we have now reached the top 5, and this is the part that shifted around quite a bit right before I decided to record this video. So some of these placements will be brand new to some of you people who thought you knew my ranking before. I just, again, and this is being completely honest here, I'm not joking around like I did with the killer thing. I had to be true to myself and how I really feel about these movies after really thinking about them. So, number 5 is going to probably piss a lot of people off, Fight Club. I think Fight Club is a really good movie. It's not one that I rewatch very often. It's not one that resonates with me as much as it does with most people. There are a lot of things to like about the movie. I think this is probably my favorite Brad Pitt performance. This is like peak cool Brad Pitt. Norton is great. Helena Bonham Carter is great. Meatloaf is great. Jared Leto, again, apparently Fincher is the only person who knows how to use Jared Leto. Great again. Great cast all around. The fights are cool. And I love it's like simultaneously a commentary on male loneliness and also a takedown of toxic masculinity. And there's some nuance here for sure. I think people get confused a little bit when people talk about this. Like I saw the interview that they did with Fincher where they asked him about, far right people and incels taking this movie and, running with it and misunderstanding the message and thinking that Tyler Durden is a positive influence. And he's like, if that's what you take away from the movie, I don't know what to tell you. You're wrong. I can't help you. So that's basically what he said. Tyler Durden is, at his core, some of the stuff he has to say is interesting. I mean, the anti-establishment stuff, the anti-consumerism stuff. I agree with that. I think the foundation of, his message is good. Unfortunately, and this is exactly what the movie is telling you, he takes it way too far and literally becomes a domestic terrorist, attacking people, blowing up buildings. That's not how you go about being anti-establishment. That is taking it way too far. I mean, literally, the first thing he does is light an apartment on fire. Like, that's not the way to go about it. This guy is clearly bad. He is clearly a bad influence, and he's the epitome of toxic masculinity. So that's what they were saying with this character, and people are misinterpreting that, and Fincher shut that down, which I absolutely loved. So there is some really good commentary in there. The twist of Tyler Durden and the narrator being the same person on initial watch was great. I never saw it coming. Seems fairly obvious on rewatch, but you never notice that stuff on first watch. The flashes are really cool. I like just all the banter they have and the weird shit that Tyler Durden does, like riding the bike around the apartment or the house or whatever, and playing with the nunchucks. So many funny lines in here, like, you're too fucking blonde. This movie works. Just not the kind of thing, again, that I tend to gravitate towards as much as the movies that are ahead of it on this list. So for that reason, I'm not quite as high as on it as most people, but I really do appreciate this movie and love a lot of elements about it. So Fight Club comes in at number 5. Number 4, which was actually my number 2 prior to rewatching these movies, is Gone Girl. This one went down just a little bit for me on rewatch, and as I think about it more. Now, let me just say, the movie is still incredibly effective. I think the acting all around is great. This is one of Ben Affleck's best performances. Rosamund Pike is an absolute psycho lunatic in this movie, and she plays that so well. Carrie Coon is also phenomenal as Affleck's sister, and their relationship is one of the better parts of the movie. When I first watched this movie, I thought the whole movie was going to be about the investigation into Ben Affleck, whether or not he killed her and what happened to her. Then we get the turn halfway through the movie, and you're like, wait a minute, what the hell? She's still alive? Where is this going? But it completely works. And then we get the moment where she kills Neil Patrick Harris, which is just shocking. I remember the first time I watched that, I was like, I jumped in my seat. I was like, holy shit, this chick is a psychopath. And let me just say, Ben Affleck's character is not a good guy. He's a douchebag. He's a cheater. Divorce him. Don't frame him for killing you. Kill someone else, then come back and trap him in the marriage. And look, we can debate this. He is absolutely trapped in the marriage. Yes, technically he could divorce her. It wouldn't go very well for him if he did. It's a very difficult situation, and that's what makes the ending so bleak and, in my opinion, so effective. People are mixed on that ending, and I completely understand why. Now, again, like I said, it doesn't work quite as well on rewatch because I know the twist, I know the turn, and there are a couple plot holes in there. Like, why wouldn't they investigate into her a little bit more? Yeah, I understand all that completely, but it is still very effective. It still has phenomenal dialogue. Tyler Perry is awesome. I haven't really seen any of his other stuff, but he is great and likable in this one and brings some humor to the movie. So loses a little bit of luster on rewatch, but still incredibly effective movie with great performances and shocking moments. Coming in at number 3, this is the one that I was talking about that by far and away moved up the most after rewatching it, and that is Zodiac. Holy shit, this movie grew on me so much. Before I recorded this video, I was ready to put it at number 5, which is already 2 spots ahead of what it was before at number 7. But the more I think about this movie, I'm like, God, this is just so fucking good. I mean, I remember it being boring the first time I watched it, probably about the same time I watched Girl with a Dragon Tattoo about 10 years ago. I rewatched it a few days ago, and I'm like, this is so damn compelling. I mean, maybe it's because I've gotten more into true crime lately. I find that stuff really interesting. And I didn't remember much about the movie aside from the fact that they don't catch him in the end. So all these little trails they go down, all these paths they go down, all these people they investigate, all these conversations they have with each other, just so damn good. And all of it worked for me. The characters are great. Mark Ruffalo, Robert Downey Jr., especially Jake Gyllenhaal, especially when you get in the second half, when it really focuses on him and his obsession and how it completely consumes his life and ruins his marriage. I just love the interrogation scenes, the scene at the end with Ruffalo and Gyllenhaal talking, where they're like kind of figuring out that they think it might be Arthur Lee Allen, and Gyllenhaal's like, so when did the calls start again? It was right around this time. When was he in prison? When did he get out of prison? Where did he live relative to this person? All that stuff just super compelling to me and worked so much better for me on rewatch. And even though it's a relatively long movie, it flows really well because you have the through line of the Zodiac investigation. And Rob Fishback, who I did the stream with him and a couple other guys on the Fincher, when we were doing the Fincher tier list, he described it perfectly. Fincher movies, at least his best ones, are a snow globe. Like, it's contained. All the stuff going on in the movie is what matters. Nothing else going on in the world. And I love that about the best Fincher movies. And I had to shout out him for describing it that way, which I think is a great way to describe these movies. So the one thing that holds this movie back for me is the fact that there is no resolution. And I understand that that's unavoidable because this is based on a true story, because they never caught the Zodiac killer in real life. But when you're watching this movie and you get to the end and it just ends without a resolution, it is a bit of a letdown. And that's what holds it back just a tiny bit, keeping it at number 3. Otherwise, it would probably be at number 2. But actually coming in at number 2 is going to be The Social Network. This movie is just so much better than it has any right to be. And this is one where I kind of have trouble describing why it's so good, but it's like a perfect storm of everything coming together perfectly. First of all, you got Sorkin's script, which is phenomenal. The dialogue is so good and sharp and snappy in this movie. Combine that with Fincher's directing, and you get like the perfect combination. The perfect mix of just entertainment and humor and being it's so much more compelling than it should be. Like when they announced they were going to make a movie about the Facebook guy, I'm like, really? Is that really necessary? That sounds stupid. But I watched it and I'm like, man, this is awesome. Jesse Eisenberg was the perfect person to pick for the role of Mark Zuckerberg. He's a guy who is so unlikable and so douchey and doesn't really know how to interact with people, but you're still somehow endeared to him and you want to see where this goes. You want to follow him on his journey and you admire his tenacity. This is Justin Timberlake. I've only seen him in a few movies, but he's awesome in this one. I mean, you wouldn't think he's that good of an actor. He's great as Sean Parker. Again, super unlikable douche, but also kind of funny and likable in a way. Eisenberg himself has this great, like, dry, like, robotic humor that works perfectly when he talks back to people. Andrew Garfield is the nice guy of the movie, the guy that we really like and root for, and he gets totally screwed over by Zuckerberg, and you feel so bad for him. One of Garfield's best performances. You get a little bit of Rooney Mara in here as well. Looks way different than she did in Dragon Tattoo, and they came out about a year apart. The score is phenomenal from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. I'm a big score guy. This is one of my favorite scores of all time. It is just so damn good. Damn it, I need to stop doing that. And fits the movie perfectly. Again, it's hard to describe why this movie works so well, but it's everything came together between Sorkin's script, between Fincher's directing, between the casting and the score. It all just comes together to make an immensely compelling and entertaining and rewatchable film that is so much better than it ever should have been. Coming in at number 1 is obviously going to be Seven. Every single list that I do with Seven on it is going to have Seven at number 1. This list, my favorite horror movies, my favorite movies from the 90s, my favorite movies ever, it is my favorite movie of all time. And I've talked about it. This is probably my 6th time talking about this movie on my channel, but there's just so much to say about it. I'm just going to run through the basics real quick in case you haven't seen me talk about Seven before. Phenomenal acting, Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt. Their characters are so compelling and fleshed out, even though on paper they're kind of cliches. You got the older guy who's cynical and at the end of his career, and the younger guy who's green and wants to change the world for the better and is more optimistic and naive. But because they're so well fleshed out, because they're so well written, because the dialogue is so good and their conversations are so good, it doesn't matter. The bar scene with them is just so damn good and perfectly encapsulates these two different worldviews. And they both make interesting points. Like, some days I feel more like Somerset, some days I feel more like Mills. Incredibly well-written characters. You get the main plot that is very intriguing and compelling and thrusts you right into it from the start with the gluttony kill, which is really disgusting. You have this killer in John Doe who is killing people in these very disturbing and unique ways, but you don't see the actual kills. You only see the aftermath, and that, to me, makes it even scarier because you're left to your imagination to picture how it happened. Lust, in particular, is incredibly disturbing and makes my stomach turn every single time that scene happens. Again, even though you don't even see it, you see the weapon that was used for it. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. And you see the guy getting interrogated after, which I don't know that actor's name, but he did a phenomenal job. Totally bought into him being this guy who just went through this incredibly traumatic experience. It is so well paced. I mean, it takes breaks once in a while for character stuff, but not a single scene is wasted. There isn't a single thing I would change about this movie, whether it's the casting or the dialogue or the pacing. Nothing. There isn't a single performance or scene, nothing I would change about this movie. And up until the finale, it was great. Already a phenomenal movie. But the finale is really what makes Seven what it is, because it completely subverts all the tropes and expectations for a typical Hollywood serial killer movie when the killer John Doe turns himself in. And at that point, you're like, what the hell? Where is this going to go? And the last 20 minutes to half hour of the movie, I don't know exactly how long it is, from the point he turns himself in up until the point where the movie ends, is like the best stuff I've ever seen in any movie. I remember the first time watching it and just being so on the edge of my seat. I was like shaking, getting chills. I was trying to figure out what the hell was going on, because when I watched it for the first time, I didn't know. I didn't know there was going to be Gwyneth Paltrow's head in the box. I did not know that. And I was racking my brain. He's like, when I'm done, this is going to be studied and puzzled over. I'm like, what the fuck is going to happen? Where is this going? That car ride is so damn intense. And then they get to the open field, and then we get the what's in the box stuff, and then Pitt kills him. Whew. Even talking about it is making me exhausted. And every single time I watch that movie, I just sit there and watch the credits roll. The first time I watched it, my jaw was on the floor. One of the most shocking endings of all time. Incredibly effective. And again, up until that point, it was great. Great characters, great cinematography. The score is phenomenal from Howard Shore. I mean, it totally elevates the movie and gives you that like creepy horror feeling. It is a horror movie, which I already ranted about that. Not going to get into that here. But the movie looks fantastic, like it could have been made today, but it's almost 30 years old. I can go on and on about how great this is. Every single thing about it works. It's my favorite movie of all time. It is the peak Fincher for me. It's the movie where like everything that makes any other Fincher movie good is combined into one movie. Nothing bad to say about it. 7 is perfect. It is my number 1 David Fincher movie.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
So, there you have it, guys. There's my ranking of all 12 David Fincher movies from the worst to the best, or really, my least favorite to favorite, because, again, film is subjective. So, how would you rank these movies? Drop a comment below. Let's start a conversation. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Likes are super important for pushing my videos out to more people, help me grow my channel. If you want to see more, subscribe, hit the notification bell to get notified when I post a video. Stay tuned. I got some more stuff coming. I will see you soon.